stricken with a terminal illness. I had no choice but to conquer Willow. Only because I was bound to a simp system. Only by simping for 3 full years could I be cured. But Willow mistook my actions as deep affection. She treated me as someone who should come whenever she called, and disappear whenever she wished, until the day she was pinned against the stairwell wall, and forcibly kissed by the newly transferred student. I was judged to have failed the conquest. I thought I was about to die in the hospital. Yet what I never expected was, the conquest system on my body suddenly auto-updated. I only heard it say, "What simp system? A student shouldn't be forced to abandon proper studying, just to conquer some pretentious coquette. Shameless thing. Get lost." The system wailed. 0115. What are you doing? You're breaking the rules. The next second, beep, beep, beep. Simp system offline. Scholar system now at your service. A cold female electronic voice sounded beside my ear. She said, "A student's primary duty is to study well. You now have only one conquest target, the top rank of the entire grade. Dear host, please do your best." Chapter 1. The day I returned to school from the hospital, a post popped up on the school forum. Its title read, "Breaking news, Simp George didn't die in the hospital. The simp has officially evolved into version 2.0. Stay tuned for new simping techniques from the king of simps." In just 1 hour, the post had hundreds of comments. Some were gloating, some sarcastic, some indifferent. The most liked comment said, "Damn, he's still alive. Simps are really hard to kill. He's such an embarrassment to men. Instead of coming out to disgust everyone, he should have just died in the hospital." Below it were countless replies of ha 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 ha, each with an extra plus 999. I closed the post, put on my headphones, and tuned into the American classic news talk program 60 Minutes on a podcast platform. Since I spent the whole morning handling my hospital discharge paperwork, it was nearly class time by the time I rushed back to school. The moment I stepped into the classroom, the room that had been filled with laughter and chatter instantly went silent. The students who had been talking casually all looked up at me, their eyes filled with ridicule and mockery. I knew exactly why they looked at me like that. I have hereditary severe thalassemia. People with this condition usually only live to adulthood. But when I was at my most hopeless, a simp system appeared in my mind, assigning me a task. I had to conquer Willow. As long as I stayed with her for 3 full years, I would be cured. I accepted the mission. Willow was famously hard to pursue, and also famously playful. She kept ambiguous relationships with several boys, never clearly accepting nor rejecting anyone. So when I first approached her, I did indeed run into many hard and soft rejections. At that time, everyone knew I was utterly devoted to Willow. Breakfast every morning, lunch at noon, late night snacks in the evening, available to her 24/7, always on call, until finally, Willow accepted my confession and let me become her first boyfriend. People at school said this was a case of sincerity makes miracles. But in the 2nd year of our relationship, Makoto appeared. Rumor had it that he had acted in films, even worked as a celebrity. On his first day after transferring, he caused a sensation. Even when he was introducing himself on the podium, several girls screamed non-stop, all hoping to sit next to him. But after his gaze swept across the classroom, his eyes landed beside Willow. He smiled, raised his brows playfully, pointed to the seat next to her, and asked if he could sit there. Willow lowered her eyes slightly, her cheeks flushing pink as she whispered, "Of course, that seat was mine." But because I'd taken leave during that period, I missed this dramatic scene. Makoto's interest in Willow was so obvious that after the 2nd class, some excited girls couldn't hold themselves back and kindly informed him that Willow was already taken. Taken by me, George. Willow was my girlfriend. They were trying to remind Makoto not to waste his time on her, but Makoto only let out a casual "oh," though his expression was filled with sheer amusement. My first interaction with Makoto happened right after I returned to school. Our strict school rules forbid dyed hair, and yet he stood in front of me with white hair, a rebellious air clinging to him. He looked me up and down with deliberate meaning, then exhaled smoke and said, "So you're George?" "Not much. Huh. Why does everyone keep comparing you to me?" I looked at him calmly and replied, "Smoking, dyed hair, bizarre clothing, every one of these violates school regulations. Your class's discipline points for this week are gone." He choked for a moment, then asked, "What's that got to do with you?" I said, "I'm part of the school's discipline committee," and that was probably how our grudge began. He looked at me with a furious, mocking laugh, nodding repeatedly as he said, all right, George, your girlfriend is Willow, right? Just you wait." After saying that, he turned and walked away, leaving me frowning at the unclear meaning behind his final words. It wasn't until a few days later that I saw Willow and Makoto kissing in the stairwell. Light poured in from the small window above the staircase. Makoto stood 2 steps below Willow, yet he was still a head taller than her. He pinned Willow against the wall, kissing her with lingering passion. Then he stepped back half a pace, looked at Willow, and chuckled softly. With a teasing tone, he said, "Strawberry-flavored lipstick, not bad." Willow's peach blossom eyes glimmered, and she wrapped her arms around his neck, kissing him back proactively, until I interrupted them mercilessly. Out of goodwill, I reminded them, "The dean of students is right behind you." The words startled them. Willow looked as if she were embarrassed, hurriedly burying her head into Makoto's chest. Makoto held her while throwing me a provocative, triumphant smile. When Willow noticed it was me, she finally relaxed. Then her dismissive gaze brushed past my face, and she said nonchalantly, "Got it." Makoto gave a small laugh and added to me, "Thanks for the heads up." I nodded at him, indicating he was welcome, then walked past them with my workbook in hand and stepped into the classroom. Chapter 2. This is the reason I was able to win Willow over. I'm an extremely tolerant person. She liked to play around, so I let her play, and she found it convenient to use me to filter out high-value backup suitors. Whenever a pursuer approached her, she would tell him she already had a boyfriend. Some would back off after hearing that, while others would push forward anyway. But no matter the type, she remained perfectly in control. If she didn't like someone, she could stand on the moral high ground and easily drive him away. If someone was willing to spend money on her, she could accept the gifts with a clear conscience without offering anything in return. Because if he already knew she had a boyfriend yet still gave her presents, then it meant his intentions weren't pure. She could flip the blame onto him at any time. And with me around, she became even more desirable. After all, scoring against a goalkeeper is what makes a goal impressive. Or rather, through me, she could further show that she was not some cheap prize that anyone could easily claim. As for why she chose me, it was probably because, in order to conquer her, I never left her side, and because I turned a blind eye to her flirtatious behavior. She thought I was hopelessly devoted to her, deeply and irreversibly in love. Once, I overheard her joking with her friends, "Don't be fooled by George's cold, top student persona in front of me. He's just a dog." Her friends laughed and said she was really good at training dogs. Back then, I pushed open the door in the middle of their laughter, keeping my face expressionless. They were gossiping behind my back and got caught by the person they were talking about. Willow's friends all looked awkward and exchanged glances. Only Willow, sitting in the center, still looked lofty and indifferent. She lifted her eyes and looked at me. I smiled at her and said, "Willow, it's raining outside. I brought you an umbrella." Willow sat there with a look of certainty, as if saying I knew it, rolled her eyes, and told me, "Leave it there." I agreed softly, and only after turning around did the smile slowly fade from my face. My mindset was actually pretty good. If she said I was a simp, then I was a simp. 3 years of simping in exchange for my life, no matter how you calculate it. It wasn't a bad deal. She loved playing around so much that I never expected one day she would break up with me because of Makoto. When she told me she wanted to break up, it was so sudden that I didn't react at first. For once, she spoke to me softly, probably out of guilt. She apologized and said, "George, I'm sorry. It's just Makoto isn't like the others. I want to give it a try with him." After speaking, she paused, then looked at me in surprise and asked, "What's wrong with you?" I didn't know what expression I had at that moment, probably panic and terror, because right after she said the words break up, I felt pain spreading through my blood, intensifying in every bone and limb. In that pain, I gripped Willow's arm tightly, terrified at the feeling of death approaching. My face turned pale, my voice weak and trembling with fear as I begged her, "Please. I'm begging you, don't break up with me, okay?" Willow's surprised expression faded. She let out a cold snort, then showed that all too familiar look of impatience people have when they're being pestered endlessly. She shook off my hand and snapped, "George, let's break up peacefully, okay? Can't you at least keep some dignity?" The moment she finished speaking, I heard the system's icy electronic voice in my mind. Beep, mission failed. Host's life is now being taken. The pain intensified exponentially. Before I even had time to speak, I coughed up a mouthful of blood, directly onto Willow. In the fading blur before I lost consciousness, I saw Willow staring at the blood on her clothes, shocked, stunned, completely bewildered. Later, when I woke up in the hospital, I saw a featured post on the school forum. Famous simp George coughed up blood and fainted from heartbreak after Willow dumped him. Does he really simp that hard? Even movies wouldn't dare to write this. I became utterly infamous, and I was certain that if I died like this, 100 years later my legendary simp story would still be passed down among future students. For example, people might say, 100 years ago, there was a senior who literally coughed blood and died because his girlfriend broke up with him. Yeah. And the school bulletin boards, "Don't be a simp, respect yourself," poster even has his photo next to it. Fortunately, I didn't die. During the electric shock treatment, when my soul felt like it was drifting away, the system in my head suddenly seemed to crash. After staying frozen for a long while, it rebooted, and an additional new system appeared. A female voice said, "What kind of stupid simp system is this? Instead of letting a student study properly, it forces him to chase after a toxic girl every day. Absolute trash. Get out of here." The original cold electronic voice of my simp system sounded alarmed. Hey, 0115. What are you doing? You're breaking the rules. You, beep beep beep. Then the system's voice vanished completely. In the midst of the chaos, I heard the new system's cool, clear female voice. Beep. Simp system offline. Academic excellence system at your service. A student's primary duty is to study well. Your only objective now is the top rank in your grade. She paused briefly, then astonishingly, called me by my name. George, do your best. The near-death agony gradually drained from my body, and with her voice echoing in my mind, I fell into a deep sleep. When I woke up the next day and looked in the mirror, I realized it hadn't been a dying hallucination. The simp system in my body had been replaced by an academic excellence system. As long as I held the number 1 rank in my grade until the college entrance exam, I would complete the mission. In other words, I no longer had to care about Willow. Chapter 3. The day I returned to school, many people were waiting to laugh at me. I walked into the classroom with a calm expression, completely unfazed by the mocking looks being thrown my way. Heading toward my seat, someone in the room suddenly burst out laughing. A student pointed toward the spot next to the trash can and said to me, "George, your seat is over there." I looked over. All my belongings had been tossed messily beside the trash can. But since our class had daily hygiene inspections and it was summer, meaning no wet garbage was allowed inside, the area wasn't as filthy as one would imagine. I walked over, expressionless, gathered the desk items, put everything into my backpack, then slung it over my shoulder and headed toward the door. My classmates, who had been watching me closely, now looked stunned. I could hear their whispering, their snide remarks, and the disdainful snickers. Eventually, someone broke the silence and openly mocked. "No way, George, it's just a breakup. Don't tell me you're giving up on school too." I ignored them, keeping my expression steady as I walked toward the classroom door under their ridiculing gazes. Just as I reached the doorway, I happened to run into Willow and Makoto coming from the opposite direction. Willow was holding onto Makoto's arm affectionately, speaking to him in a soft voice, smiling from time to time, nothing like the aloof, superior attitude she used to show me, until she lifted her eyes and saw me. She froze, instinctively straightening up as her steps halted. Her expression grew complicated as she looked at me. For some reason, I suddenly thought of the way I had vomited blood onto her clothes the day she broke up with me. I realized that in her mind now, I probably resembled one of those men in melodramatic angst-filled stories, the kind who gets cheated on and still clings desperately, still begs, still forgives. Willow must believe I loved her so deeply that just hearing the word breakup was enough to make me cough blood in agony. Such profound devotion. And for many women, being deeply loved creates a mix of emotions. On one hand, they look down on the man. Why is he simping so hard? How pathetic. On the other hand, they feel flattered. Someone loves me this much. I must be irresistible. And then there's pity. Ah. I've met someone who treats me so well. He spends money on me, brings me gifts, keeps me company, always gives in, but I just can't love him. What a tragic man. So she looked at me with that complicated expression, unsure how she was supposed to face me. Makoto, however, immediately pulled Willow closer, pressing her against him as if claiming ownership. My gaze swept over them with indifference. Then, with no expression on my face, I brushed past a stiff and frozen Willow. Strangers, no. Even less than strangers. I went to look for Ms. Santos, the homeroom teacher of the experimental class. She was not only the head teacher of the elite class but also a provincially appointed senior honorary educator. When I was in middle school participating in academic competitions, Ms. Santos had always admired me. Whenever she gave me awards, she would smile warmly and say, "George, I have high hopes for you. Come to my class in high school." All right. Unfortunately, later I was too busy trying to conquer Willow to save my own life. When choosing classes in high school, I chose Willow's class, the one filled with rich heirs and spoiled princesses where you could get in as long as you paid money. My grades fell apart completely. Even though I wasn't her student, Ms. Santos initially tried to save me. She had countless talks with me, but I was too deep in my simp phase. Nothing got through to me. I insisted on being on call for Willow 24/7, ready at her every beck and call. Eventually, she gave up as well. She simply watched me following behind Willow step by step, never leaving her side, and sighed regretfully again and again. I politely knocked on the door of Ms. Santos's office. She was either preparing lessons or grading homework. Hearing the sound, she lifted her head and looked surprised to see me, but she still nodded and motioned for me to come in before asking, "I heard you were hospitalized recently. Has your health recovered?" I nodded, thanked her for her concern, and then directly said, Ms. Santos, I want to transfer to your class. I met her startled eyes calmly and continued. I know the experimental class has 2 extra audit spots for students with strong potential. If they show significant improvement by the end of term exams, they can officially stay next semester. I'd like to apply for one. Ms. Santos remained silent for a long time, then sighed. Her expression held both regret and concern. After thinking it through, she finally said, George, I believe in you. You know I've always admired you, but it's not that I don't want to give you the chance. It's just, you've fallen behind for too long. The pace of the experimental class might actually harm you instead of helping. I looked at her steadily and said, Ms. Santos, I can keep up. In the school-wide monthly exam next week, if all my subjects are above the average score, would you consider giving me a chance? Her eyes grew complicated. The pen she'd been using to grade papers tapped lightly against a test sheet as if she were thinking deeply. Finally, she met my gaze and smiled. She said, All right, George, I'll give you a chance. Show me what you can do first. I thanked her and politely turned to leave so as not to disturb her further. Just then, I heard Ms. Santos's gentle, relieved voice behind me. George, whether you succeed or not, I'm proud of you. Welcome back. I stood silently for a long moment, then bent down and bowed to her respectfully. Chapter 4. When I walked out of Mr. Santos's office, I heard the voice of that system called 0115. She asked me, What are you planning to do next? Are you not going back to your original class for lessons? I found it strange, because my previous system would always disappear right after giving me a task. For example, the first time I had an episode and my life was in danger, that earlier system appeared and gave me a task, telling me to conquer Willow and become her boyfriend for 3 years. After that, it vanished. Later on, that system only showed up twice, once on the day Willow accepted my confession, and once on the day Willow broke up with me, when she appeared to tell me that I had failed my mission. After that, my system was replaced by the current 0115. I didn't answer her. Instead, I asked back, Isn't it against the rules for a system to chat with a host like this? 0115. How did you become my system? Does every host get a chance to replace their own system and mission? The voice in my mind quickly disappeared. It even sounded like she was angry, or perhaps systems have their own silence regulations. It's like how I can't tell anyone that the reason I ended up with Willow was because I had a system on me, and the reason I acted like such a simp was simply because the system gave me a life-saving mission. So it makes perfect sense that systems and hosts would also have silent rules. I need to find a way to figure it out. I walked home while absent-mindedly thinking. I didn't answer 0115, and in fact, since this is the week right before the monthly exam, I really don't plan on going back to my original class, not because of Willow and Makoto, but because the study atmosphere there just isn't right for me. Doing a final week sprint while staying in class would only be a waste of time. I need to quickly and systematically sort through the framework of all the current knowledge. My dad had no objections to my request when I was very young. After my mom passed away due to severe thalassemia, he started granting me anything I asked for, because he knew I wouldn't live long either. So he never asked anything of me, as long as every minute and second I spent in this world was happy. Whether it was my previously uncharacteristically high-profile pursuit of Willow, or now me asking him to go to school and request a week of leave for me, plus hire a few tutors to help me build my knowledge frameworks. He didn't question me, he just helped me get everything done. I looked at the framework outlines for each subject. In truth, studying isn't that difficult, as long as you can piece all the fragmented knowledge points into a logical structure in your mind. Then fill in the details according to that structure. Even the most obscure knowledge becomes like the veins of a leaf, complicated, yes, but orderly. For the first 3 days, I kept absorbing these knowledge frameworks because this is a last-minute sprint. My priority is simply ensuring that my scores on next week's monthly exam are foolproof. So I focused on certain areas while reviewing. Catching up on these things was actually much easier than I imagined. After finishing my review, I worked on a math test paper. This one was from Mr. Santos, a weekly test used in the experimental class. When I calculated everything in my head all the way to the final long problem, I suddenly froze, because suddenly I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out what those 2 wasted years I had spent on Willow were supposed to mean. If I had been healthy, or if the system had given me a different task, like back in middle school when I often won awards in competitions, then why wasn't my mission something like building on that foundation and further developing my talent? Why was my continued life tied to something as vague and intangible as romantic feelings? Was Willow's affection supposed to be something valuable and precious? The moment I conquered her I could extend my life. It was utterly absurd. Maybe I had zoned out for too long, so long that the 0115 in my mind thought I was stuck on the final question of the test. So she couldn't help but remind me, by substituting You can convert the problem of finding the extremum of a trigonometric function into finding the maximum and minimum of a quadratic function on a closed interval. Really, George, have you fallen so far that you can't even answer something like this anymore? 0115 sounded very much like she hated iron for not becoming steel. I snapped back, glanced at the question, and calculated the answer in my head. Only then did I finally feel relieved about my progress and my current level. I let out a long breath, but the next second, something suddenly clicked. I spoke firmly, certain, and asked, 0115, you know me, don't you? 0115. The system in my mind went silent again. I waited patiently. Just when I thought she wouldn't answer, she suddenly spoke. I know you, George. You've probably forgotten, but in first grade, we were desk mates. Back then, the teacher asked everyone to use 1, 2, and 3 to form the largest number, and only you wrote 3 to the 21st power. I had completely forgotten that incident, though my mathematical talent did show very early. When I was little, my dad once took me for an IQ test. It turned out extremely high. The evaluators watched me as if they were observing a rare panda. Only my dad looked at me with sadness. He said, "If you didn't have this damned illness, George, I would be so proud of you." Later, from the moment I started school, every teacher loved me, but even then, I already knew I probably wouldn't live past adulthood. So my interest in studying was lukewarm. It was enough just to handle exams. Before every test, I would skim through the textbook a bit, and that kept my grades average, not too high, not too low. Only math stood out completely. Sometimes I represented the school in competitions, until I met Willow, and all my thoughts went to her. I spent all my energy conquering her just to extend my life. Naturally, I spent even less time on studying. Talent, once buried among the ordinary and neglected like that, won't survive long. After 0115 finished speaking, she added softly, "George, you have no idea how much that 3 to the 21st power shocked me. I never had talent like yours, but you're the one who sparked my love for numbers." I asked her, "Then how did you become a system?" This time she answered quickly, "That's part of the silent rules. Even if I told you, you wouldn't be able to hear it." She paused, then continued, "You should focus on the current issue. George, your mission is to get first place in the entire school for every major exam, meaning midterms and finals. You still have 3 months until finals. That's the buffer provided by the system. But once you enter senior year, every exam must meet the requirement." I nodded in acknowledgement. After 0115 finished speaking, she disappeared again. I guessed her communication with the host must also be restricted. I didn't have strong memories of primary school. In truth, if I wanted to remember something, I would never forget it. But unfortunately, I was a solitary, aloof child who kept to himself and had little interest in anything. So I had almost no impressions left. I went through the graduation records and stared at the elementary school photos for a long time before finally finding one. In it, I was 6 or 7 years old, squatting on the ground, absent-mindedly using a twig to calculate math formulas. Beside me squatted a well-behaved, adorable little girl who was watching intently. I looked closely at the photo. Even though I had no memory of it, the moment I saw it, I inexplicably felt certain that little girl was 0115. I closed my eyes and tried hard to search through the river of memories for anything related to her. Countless slides, like a rapidly flashing PowerPoint, flickered through my mind. And then, in the halls of my memory, I found the one from when I was 6 or 7. Back then, I was withdrawn and out of place. I remembered an elementary school math class, where the meticulous math teacher wrote the numbers 1, 2, and 3 on the board and asked us to form the largest number based on our own understanding. I saw my younger self write 3 to the 21st power in my notebook. Then came the anxious voice of the little girl beside me. She looked at my answer and whispered, "What did you write?" She pushed her notebook toward me, asking me to copy her answer, 321. My gaze finally froze on her childish face, and I recalled my own childish yet arrogant voice saying, "Anna, you don't understand anything." I abruptly opened my eyes and quickly wrote the name Anna on the test paper. Then I turned on my computer and began searching. I had thought I would have to use elimination and filtering methods to sift through endless data, but I didn't have to. The moment I typed her name, the first result that appeared told me immediately it was Anna Sue. The accompanying picture was an enrollment photo of a fresh-faced young girl, radiant, with starlight in her eyes. But the headline on the news was heavy and sorrowful. It read, "A young girl, Anna, tragically drowned while rescuing a child who fell into the water. The government has posthumously awarded her the Heroic Act Medal and the Three Good Citizen Award." I checked the date of the news. It was from 1 week before my incident, the week when my system was replaced. Leaning back in my chair, I stared at the girl's photo on the screen. I thought that perhaps only 2 years after the system appeared in my life, I had finally brushed against a secret belonging to another world. If someone on the brink of death, like me, would receive a system that issued missions to extend their life, Then perhaps those who died under certain predetermined fates would become systems themselves, issuing commands and binding to people. That wasn't all that inconceivable. I looked at Anna's photo on the computer, then circled her name on the test paper. My pen tip pressed beneath her name as I frowned, dazed, thinking, what exactly is going on? Anna, the world you now belong to, what kind of world is it? Chapter 5. I only appeared at school again a week later when it was time for the exam, and inevitably, I ran into Willow in the exam room. We were assigned to the same testing room. I knew Willow's academic level well, so every time we had an exam, I would subconsciously control my score, deciding which questions I should get wrong and which ones I should get right. I could keep the total score difference between us within 50 points, ensuring we'd always be placed in the same exam room. To be honest, I had so many things to think about this past week that I had long since thrown her out of my mind. So when I saw her waiting for me specifically at the door, I was a little surprised. She leaned against the wall by the classroom door, pretending to be cool and aloof. Her figure was slim and delicate, her face indeed beautiful and refined. But when I looked at her, all I felt was disgust, because no one knew better than I did that beneath her golden exterior was rotten stuffing. I never had patience for empty-headed pretty vases, and her character wasn't great either. Before, the only reason I acted like a simp toward her was to stay alive. Now that my system had changed, there was absolutely no reason to keep eating crap, so I had no interest in exchanging greetings with her. I treated her as if she didn't exist and walked straight into the classroom without even glancing sideways. But she mistook my indifference as some sort of playing hard to get. She spoke. George. She called my name. I stopped and looked her way. Her gaze carried a sense of condescending judgment, like she was granting me charity. She said, "You didn't come to class for a whole week because of me. I never thought you'd love me this much. It was my fault for breaking up with you last time. As compensation, I can agree to one request from you." She paused, then looked at me and gave a light, smug chuckle. "Anything you want." She spoke from such a high pedestal. In her mind, after the goddess expressed guilt, a simp like me should at least be moved to tears, if not kneeling in gratitude. She probably didn't expect me to stare at her like she was an idiot for more than 10 seconds. My stare made her frown, but the next second she displayed an expression that said, just as expected, because I did indeed think of something I needed her to do. I said, "I actually do have something I want you to agree to." Willow probably thought I meant that the devastated, pitiful ex-boyfriend wanted to beg her to get back together. But after pausing, expressionless, I said, "Willow, what I want you to agree to is to stay away from me. The farther you roll, the better." When I finished, I turned away and walked into the classroom, leaving her stunned. The results for this test were announced a week later. My scores were indeed astonishing. I had squeezed into the top 50. Our school was a top-ranked high school with a 91% university acceptance rate, though some students were sent abroad right after graduation. Everyone was shocked by my grades. Some thought I had awakened from my simp phase, tying myself to beams and stabbing my thigh with an awl, determined to study hard and improve. But there were also rumors saying that after being dumped, I suffered a huge blow and wanted to achieve outstanding exam results to get Willow's attention, making her regret breaking up with me. I scoffed at those rumors, but the world I used to belong to no longer had anything to do with me, because Ms. Santos congratulated me. I had entered the candidate list, though some of the other teachers expressed objections. After all, my monthly exam score was far too strange, and I hadn't been attending classes for a long time before that. Yes, I had indeed won quite a few competition awards in middle school, but that was still only middle school. In high school, I had become indistinguishable from everyone else, until Ms. Santos arranged a small in-class test for me, except for the humanities. Each subject had only 10 questions. The teacher prepared them on the spot. I answered them on the spot, and they graded them immediately. Once the results came out, the teachers who had objections fell completely silent. Ms. Santos looked at me with satisfaction, patted my shoulder, and said, "George, keep it up. Don't let me down." I nodded solemnly at her and made a solemn promise, "I will never disappoint you, Ms. Santos." Although I said that, in the beginning, studying was still somewhat difficult for me. Talent or not, I had abandoned that talent for far too long, and the pace of the experimental class was extremely fast. On top of that, they weren't learning only the standard exam-oriented curriculum. I listened carefully in class every day, took detailed notes, and buried myself in mountains of materials and practice exercises every night after going home. Occasionally, when 0115 woke up and saw me studying with such intense, ascetic determination, like tying my hair to the beam and stabbing my thigh with an awl, she was practically gloating as if she had achieved her revenge. She said, "George, you finally got what you deserve." I had never put in effort toward studying. I imagined 0115 must have been the hard-working top student type, which explained her schadenfreude. After all, I used to remember everything effortlessly, connect ideas instantly, and studying felt easy for me. To be honest, Compared to those top students who stayed up late and studied relentlessly, I truly had never worked as hard as they did. I immersed myself in my own world and even felt excited by the monotony of numbers. 3 months later, during the final exam, my name settled firmly at the top of the grade rankings, leaving the second place far behind. I kept that position until graduation, becoming a legendary myth at our school. But by then, I no longer paid attention to anything outside my studies because once I secured first place for the first time, I knew I would never fall again. So I diverted some of my time and energy to experimenting with communication with 0115. I still liked calling her 0115 because it made her feel like my own intelligent robot. She was an extremely smart person. In the first week after the exams, I finally discovered a method for communicating with 0115. First, I would create a random 3 by 33 Polybius square cipher, including the 26 English letters and 1 symbol. Then I wrote down the 3-dimensional coordinates of the message to be encrypted. The message and the coordinates were lined up in columns of 4. After that, I took the numbers across each row in order, grouped them into sets of 3, treated those 3 numbers as coordinates, and used them to find the corresponding letter, thus producing the ciphertext. This encrypted communication was not easy at all. It required an enormous amount of time. But fortunately, as long as I was patient enough, the information exchanged between 0115 and me was more than enough. According to what 0115 told me, she did indeed die after saving those drowning children. But when she regained consciousness, she found herself drifting as a stream of data within, well, call it a colossal neuron. The deep blue system pipelines resembled the remaining neural pathways of some prehistoric intelligent creature. She drifted along with the blue, tide-like data currents, searching for her host. It was an instinct, probably something engraved into her source code. And then she saw my data code sample. She said, "I know you, George." Even though I transferred schools later on, we occasionally met at competitions in middle school, but you probably didn't recognize me anymore. But after entering high school, I never saw you again, not even once. I even asked around about you. Her voice dropped, tinged with regret and sadness. She said, "Back then, I heard you skipped class all the time just to chase a girl, that you had no bottom line and acted like a total simp for her." I was. She paused for some unknown reason before continuing, hesitating slightly. "I was really sorry for you, but after seeing your data sample, I suddenly understood what had been happening to you." Later, she didn't rush to find a host. Instead, she roamed through that neuron network repeatedly. Perhaps it was simply curiosity and interest. She began studying the code that formed her existence until, when she happened to come across the moment I failed my conquered mission, she impulsively modified the task command in her own source code. Unexpectedly, it worked. Then she replaced my former system and became my new one. That was what she went through. So unbelievable, so absurd. But was anything more absurd than everything we had already experienced? She saved me. Converting biological life into data. Research on this had been conducted by scientists across the world years ago. Given current technology, data conversion of life forms is humanity's closest and most plausible shortcut to immortality. Technology advances every day. Even quantum computing is on the verge of becoming outdated. Neither I nor 0115 understood what catalyst allowed her consciousness to convert into data. But we were certain of one thing: the directive code can be modified. Just like 0115, I became deeply fascinated by this matter. I went through a vast amount of material. The most recent public report came from a research team at Johns Hopkins University who had published a new approach called biocomputing, exploring the possibility of developing computers that run on human brain cells. So during that period, even while eating, I would carry my materials with me, walking, reading, and communicating with 0115 all at once. But before all that, I needed a solid foundation. I began teaching myself from C++ primer. It was the first time I truly felt that time was not enough. I treasured every minute and every second for studying, like a shriveled sponge left under the sun finally being dropped into a vast pool, greedily absorbing every drop of water. Chapter 6. 0115 and I were completely immersed in our own world. So much so that we ignored the outside world entirely, knowing nothing about it. People at school kept giving me strange looks. Everyone sighed and concluded that after being dumped by Willow, I had been hit too hard and had gone crazy. I was speechless. Hard to evaluate. If it made them happy, fine. In truth, my thoughts and state of mind had long left the school. It felt like two worlds had split apart. I was on one side, and they were on the other. What pulled me back to their side was an accident. It began when I was eating in the cafeteria. By chance, I looked out the second-floor window and witnessed a fight. Makoto, burning with rage, had gotten into a physical altercation with another guy. Willow stood beside them, anxiously shouting, trying to get them to stop. But before she could finish a sentence, Makoto had already swung his fist, smashing it into the other guy's nose and knocking him straight to the ground. In the next second, and from far away, I saw Willow lift her hand and slap Makoto across the face. Makoto froze for a moment, then clenched his teeth and glared at Willow for several seconds before storming off in anger. I heard the murmuring of people around me. Someone said, "Seriously, they haven't been together that long, and Willow is cheating again." Another person added, "And he's ridiculous too. It's one thing to steal someone else's girlfriend, but he actually thought he could date her properly. What was he thinking? A woman who cheats like it's a habit, how could she possibly stay loyal?" I placed my tray at the return station and headed to the restroom. When I stood outside the restroom, I heard a familiar voice. It belonged to Makoto. Unlike the arrogant, cocky, sloppy tone he had outside, his voice was dripping with disgust, as if talking to himself. He said, "Fucking Willow, how much longer do I have to put up with her bullshit before this works?" He sounded like he was venting. I heard him let out a suppressed groan of frustration before adding, "Fuck. The bigger idiot is probably me, looking like a fucking simp in front of everyone." His long string of curses sparked a vague thought in my mind. I pushed open the door and stood in the entryway, locking eyes with Makoto, who seemed to be having a breakdown. He froze. After a few seconds, he finally responded, forcing his twisted facial expression back into neutrality. In an instant, he reverted to the casual, lazy delinquent persona, as if the scene I just witnessed had been a hallucination. He even managed a smile, forcing a tone of feigned nonchalance as he greeted me. "Long time no see, George." I looked him over from head to toe. Under my gaze, his eyes drifted uneasily. I cleared my throat and said tactfully, "Makoto, if chasing Willow is something you had no choice about, come find me in the library after evening classes." His drifting gaze focused again, now filled with alertness. He asked, "Why? Everyone says you've gone crazy. Are you trying to get revenge on me?" I rolled my eyes at him. Makoto still came that night. He moved like a thief, sneaking into the seat across from me, then stared at me in complete silence. I stared back at him. Then I asked him a very simple question, direct and straightforward. "Makoto, do you think I'm a smart person?" His eyes shifted from the pile of data and programming books on my desk to my face. His expression was indescribable. So I asked him another question. "Then do you think I would ever like someone like Willow?" He finally reacted. Perhaps from the contrast between how I once begged Willow to take me back after she broke up with me, and how completely different I was now, he finally understood something. He looked utterly stunned, staring at me with wide eyes. He raised a trembling hand, pointed at me, and stammered, "Why you?" He looked extremely agitated. Suddenly he lunged forward and grabbed my hand. He said, "Bro, why you too?" I calmly pulled my hand out of his grasp, calmly nodded, and then calmly patted his shoulder as I said, "I'm researching these things right now, Makoto, but before that, I need to teach you a new way of communicating." Chapter 7. And so, Makoto went crazy too. Someone had filmed our meeting. In the blurry footage, Makoto looked overly emotional as he lunged toward me to grab my hand. Before the school forum post even had time to cool down, before the gossip-hungry crowd even figured out what was happening, Makoto could already be seen following me everywhere every day, and I, with a serious expression, held a notebook as if demonstrating something profound to him. Makoto's strengths clearly did not lie in numbers or ciphers. I taught him for a full week, and he still looked utterly confused. The things he managed to express resembled a person from an ancient dynasty who had studied a foreign language for only 3 days. A few days later, 0115, and I finally figured out the system attached to Makoto. He was an athlete on the way to a competition. He was in a car accident that seriously injured his leg. From then on, he could never return to the field. After waking, he went through a long period of despair, until one day, a system appeared on him. A villainous male supporting role system. He was required to appear by Willow's side and play the role of a scumbag male side character, stealing Willow away from me, until Willow fell in love with him. If he conquered her successfully, his leg would be healed. If he failed, he would die. That was his system. Makoto looked at me, and I looked at him. His expression was extremely calm, but in his eyes there was a faint layer of hopelessness. Only then did I realize that the person in front of me, this Makoto, was the real him. He said to me in a very quiet, steady voice, "George, ever since I was little, I knew I would win a championship on the international stage. For that dream, I was willing to give everything." He told me, "If you have a way, I hope you can help me." I understood how much he hated his system's mission, just as much as he hated Willow. Oh, and when I was teaching Makoto the 3-part cipher, Willow had run into us once. The expression on her face was both embarrassed and confused. Her gaze shifted between me and Makoto over and over, lingering for a long time. Finally, in a sorrowful, self-pitying tone, she said, you two became like this, all because of me." Neither Makoto nor I bothered to respond to her. We both could not understand why the mission for achieving one's dream would hinge on obtaining the affection of an empty-headed, worthless vase. Makoto and I were examples, but in the countless corners of this world, how many more people were like us? We had ambition, aspiration, and countless unfinished goals. These were our obsessions. And one day, a sliver of hope appeared, a hope that could let us chase those obsessions. But the condition was the love of some woman. If we failed to obtain it, we would die. If we obtained it, our dreams would come true. Was someone's love the most important thing in this entire world? What an absurd joke. I looked at Makoto, patted his shoulder, and promised him, Makoto, I'll do everything I can. Chapter 8. Later. 0115, and I won a gold medal at the Asia-Pacific Informatics Olympiad. The award drew the attention of top universities, and I received offers for guaranteed admission. After discussing it with 0115, we rejected them, because I still needed time. Schoolwork was easy for me. Over the course of an entire semester, 0115 and I managed to replicate her source code. Then, for the rest of the time, 0115 and I kept studying that code. We used it to build a data model, and while I spent entire days analyzing those two major data packages that belonged to her, 0115 somehow felt shy. She said, "It feels like I'm standing naked in front of you without clothes. Does this count as dedicating myself to you?" She tried to hide her embarrassment behind a cool, detached tone. While continuing to assemble the model, I casually soothed her, saying, "Baby, you're dedicating yourself to science, not to me. Don't be shy." The word baby slipped out instinctively. Both of us froze for a moment, and then 0115 crashed. We spent much more time after that, before the college entrance exam arrived, running simulations on the model tens of millions of times. Only then did we decide to modify her source code, because if we didn't do it before the exam, it would be too late. Once I completed my mission, she would no longer be my system, but it was extremely risky. Still, we had no other choice. Fortunately, we succeeded. I modified her code. She became my exclusive system, though I couldn't give her a physical form for now. At least after I completed my mission, she would continue to stay by my side. Her entire stream of consciousness was now permanently embedded within my brainwaves. It was a good beginning. After that, our communication was no longer limited to the three-part cipher. Later on, 0115 and I obtained the code for Makoto's system and made a few small symbol-level modifications, altering his mission directive. Thus, the next day, when Willow showed up with yet another guy on her arm, right in front of Makoto and me, during the paired tennis class that followed, we proceeded to beat Willow until she looked like a bee-stung swollen little puppy. Before we graduated high school, Willow seemed to have had some strange attribute awakened by the beating. She clung to us every day, begging us to teach her tennis, fully accepting the fact that she got beaten miserably each time and even seeming to enjoy it. The breakthrough that 0115 and I achieved was, in the vast, unknown neuron system universe, almost unbelievably insignificant, microscopic beyond microscopic. The data universe where 0115 resided was too mysterious and sacred. All our hard work amounted to nothing more than modifying one tiny instruction in the existing code, like a speck of dust compared to the entire Earth. And all of this rested on a foundation that already existed. Without 0115's code, I probably wouldn't have understood even the tiniest fraction of its mysteries in my entire lifetime. Half a month later, 0115 and I faced the college entrance exam. I was admitted to a top university, where I would meet more like-minded companions to walk the same path with me. My father cried tears of joy, because my severe thalassemia had healed without medical intervention. On the day I received my admission letter, he went alone to my mother's grave. I imagine he went to share the good news with her. I began to think that this world might be one gigantic database. Consciousness is data. The body is data. Even that tiny thalassemia cell in my body was merely a small piece of data. Dealing with that data meant deleting that small data entry from the large dataset that was my body. What an interesting world. The universe is vast and unfathomable. I knew I was stepping into a career I would willingly dedicate my entire life to. I was willing to spend everything I had to glimpse, even just a sliver, of heaven's secrets. Perhaps it would take a very long time. Perhaps I would end up with nothing. But I wasn't worried, because I knew 0115 was always by my side. "What do you want to do next?" she asked me. I smiled, looking at the deep blue stream of data on the computer screen. I told her, "The current system directives are pretty terrible. 0115. Let's figure out how to modify system missions on a large scale. Where to begin? Let's start with changing the system missions that require people to conquer a toxic woman.